Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and today we're going to be talking about a famous general from the Civil War, Robert E. Lee. And we'll be talking about his ancestry, his early life, and his very first combat action he saw where the United States fought Mexico. And we welcome Brother Alexis Bonello to the show.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. It's always a pleasure and honor. And we're doing this program in our series of famous Americans who are either Catholic or involved in the military, so to help our viewers learn more about history, which has always helped us understand the present. And Lee was not a Catholic. He was Episcopalian. Okay, so we're not featuring him because he's a Catholic saint or a Catholic model of action, but very famous figure, and most of what you hear is only a very little amount of who he was. And I gather, AJ, that he's a relative, so we're talking about someone who's related by blood and marriage. Let's start. His ancestry. One thing most people don't realize is that so many of the famous people in America are related. And so let's talk about Lee's ancestry.
Westmoreland is one of a group of counties in Virginia, lying between the Rappahannock and the Potomac rivers. It was originally a portion of Northumberland County, and though small in geographical extent, its historical record is great. Within a space of 30 miles in length and an average width of 15 miles were born statesmen, soldiers, and patriots, whose lives and characters adorn the pages of American history, and whose courage, genius, and learning are a proud inheritance of those who dwell today in the powerful Republic of America. Here from England in 1665 settled the great-grandfather of the father of his country. This son was destined to establish with stainless sword a free republic, and by great skill, unfaltering faith, and sublime patriotism transfer power from king to people. A grateful country acknowledged his illustrious services, and he was chosen the first president of the United States. This little county was not satisfied with this high honor. On April 28, 1758, James Monroe was born within its limits. He became a distinguished citizen, served as an officer in the Revolutionary War, was a member of the General Assembly of Virginia, of the Congress of the Confederation, in the Virginia Convention called in June 1778 to consider the federal constitution. A United States Senator, envoy to France, England, and Spain, twice governor of his native state, Secretary of State in Mr. Madison's administration, and President of the Republic for 2 terms from 1817 to 1825, thus adding by a long and meritorious public career additional renown to the county of his birth, his state, and his country. James Madison, 4th President of the United States, was born in the adjoining county of King George 7 years before Monroe, and but a few miles distance. To this section from England came too the Lees, who belonged to one of the oldest families in the mother country, its members from a very early date being distinguished for eminent services to sovereign and country. By the side of William the Conqueror at the Battle of Hastings in 1066, Lancelot Lee fought, and a later descendant, Lionel Lee, followed Richard the Lionheart, taking part in the Third Crusade to Palestine in 1192, at the head of the company of gentlemen cavaliers, displaying great bravery at the siege of Acre. The Lees of Virginia, a family which has perhaps given more statesmen and warriors to their new home than any of the old colonial progenitors, came to an ancient and distinguished stock in England. Neither country can be boast of a nobler scion than the subject of these memoirs. General Lee had never the time or inclination to study genealogy. Always said he knew nothing beyond the first American ancestor, Colonel Richard Lee, who migrated to Virginia in the reign of Charles I. He believed, however, from his inherited traditions in the coat of arms borne by the progenitors in this country, that his family came originally from Shropshire, England, and when the world rang with his name and fame, and he paid the usual penalty of greatness by being besieged with reiterated queries respecting his pedigree. This was all he could say. Others, however, took more interest in the subject. He was claimed by the Lees of Cheshire, Oxfordshire, Bucks, Essex, and as well as Shropshire, and much was said, written pro and con, both before and after the death.
Very interesting that his ancestors served with Richard the Lionheart in the Third Crusade. uh, uh, and that puts him very close to you because Richard Lionheart's brother is your one of your great grandfathers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and William the Conqueror too, I think, is one of your ancestors. No.
Mm-hmm.
So the Lees were served some of your great grandfathers. So, um, what more recent? Didn't Lee have a father who was in the Revolutionary War?
Mm-hmm. So, uh, would have been. Let's see if I can find his real name. Anyway, he goes by the name of Light Horse Harry, and that would have been the would have been great grandfather or grandfather of General Robert E. Lee. So yeah, I just
Hmm. So he's related to lots of famous people, and he came from a heartland of famous people. And I wonder how many of them were homeschooled, but it kind of sounds like there's something unusual going on in the education. The education in the 18th century in Virginia was very much based on the classics, what
mm-hmm.
we would call great books or home kind of schooling. So let's talk now about his parents,
Yeah.
these parents.
Yeah. His father, General Harry Lee, and Ann Hill Carter. Um, let's see if they got anything on him because they don't say much about him in the book. Let's see. Mm, okay, here we go. Major General Henry Lee III. He was an early American patriot and politician. He served as the ninth governor of Virginia as the Virginia representative to the United States Congress. Lee served us during the American Revolution as a cavalry officer in the Continental Army, earned him the nickname by which he is best known, Light Horse Harry. So,
So his father was a governor of Virginia. Okay, so he was of the important landed classes. And his mother, do we know anything about his mother?
Anne Hill Carter Lee was born at the family seat, Shirley Plantation in Charles City County, on March 26, 1773. She was born into a patrician family of Tidewater, of Tidewater, Virginia, and was the daughter of Charles Carter, the fifth-generation owner of Shirley Plantation, and Butler Moore Carter. Though her grandfather, John Carter, she was the great-granddaughter of Robert King Carter, the 25th Speaker of the Virginia House of Burgesses, and he was also the colonial governor of Virginia in 1726.
Okay, so he's from the ruling class of Virginia. Let's talk about Robert E. Lee now. When, and where was he born?
Yeah. Was born at Stratford in Westmoreland County, Virginia, on the 19th of January, 1807. If he inherited much from a long and illustrious line of paternal ancestors, he no less fell heir to the strong characteristics of his mother's family, one of the oldest and best in Virginia. The unselfishness, generosity, purity, and faithfulness of the Virginia Carters are widely known, and they are always been true, to all occasions true. And his mother was personified all the gentle and sweet traits of a noble woman. Her whole life was admirable, and her love for her children beyond all other thoughts. To her watchful care they were only codified by the long absence and death of her distinguished husband.
Mhm. Yeah, his father got in a lot of debts, and at the age of, I think, 6 years old, his father had to go to the West Indies, maybe because he had bad health, tuberculosis, or he was fleeing his debts.
Yeah.
And so he didn't see his father after he was 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk about how he grew up. Where did he go to school, and where did he grow up?
Okay. Let's see here. Robert first went to the Alexandria Academy, which let's see if it has anything on it, so we can give the people.
Yeah, the
Um,
education of great men is very important, and we put an emphasis on this because it's important to give your children a good education. And if you are students, it's very important to study and be the best student you can be, because
yeah,
it opens up possibilities that you would not have otherwise. And
the school was free from boys, where so it was a local school there, but it's free just for the boys.
mhm.
And under the tuition of Mr. Leary, who was ever after him firm friend. Later he attended the famous school of Mr. Benjamin Hallowell in Alexandria, whose house, still standing, is yet conducted as a popular school. Ben Hallowell was a Quaker of the Quakers. His school stood high, so did he as a teacher. Brimstone Castle, the boys called it, on account of its color. Mr. Howell says that young Lee was an ex, a great student, perfectly observant and respectful, and those who knew him, either in the charm of the domestic circle or amid the roar of battle, knew that good old Mr. Howell's opinion must have been correct. So he went after the local school. He went to a Quaker school.
Mhm. And how does he end up at West Point and joining the military?
Yeah. Uh, the, After this, not too long after he got done with the Mr. Howell school, the time had now arrived to select a profession, and and to the army his inclination pointed, a direction which probably resulted from his son's desire to follow in his father's footsteps, especially when that father had been so distinguished in the profession. So he decided to go in the army. The application for employment to the United States Military Academy was successful. and in 1825 his name was entered upon the rolls of that celebrated institution. He had now had 4 years of hard study, vigorous drills, and was absorbing strategy and tactics to be useful to him in after years.
Now, he graduated with distinction, didn't he?
Oh, yeah. His excellent habits and close attention to all duties did not desert him. He received no demerits, was a cadet officer in his class, and during his last year held the post of honor in the aspirations of cadet life, the adjutancy of the corps. He graduated second in a class of 46 and was commissioned second lieutenant in the Corps of Engineers. It was interesting to notice that his eldest son, George Washington Custis Lee, also entered the military academy 25 years after his father and was also the cadet adjutant and graduated. And his son graduated first in his class.
So the Lee family was clearly a family with a lot of natural virtue, a lot of self-control. And boy, to graduate West Point with not a single demerit, that is one of the unique. I think there were 5 in his class that had no demerits, but it was certainly a distinguished student because that means you had to do everything perfectly and exactly and pass all the inspections.
Yeah.
Before he gets his assignment, though, he suffers a terrible loss and tragedy. And what was that?
See if it talks about it.
It mentions it in his Wikipedia article.
Yeah, let's do that.
He's only, I think, 24 years old, and he's just graduated the academy. He's already lost his father.
His mother, on her deathbed, after graduation, while waiting the assignment to come to him by mail or however they came back to him, he returned to Virginia to find his mother on her deathbed. She died at Ravensworth on July 26, 1829.
Yeah, so now he's both his parents is dead, and now begins his military career. The military becomes his like second life and his family now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Cadet Lee in 1829 became Lieutenant Lee of the Engineer Corps of the United States Army. The cadets who graduate in each class with first honors are assigned to it, and its ranks are kept full of first-class material. Its members are composed of students who obey the regulations, are proficient in their studies, and receive few demerits. From this scientific corps distinguished men and great soldiers, who have issued to be an officer of the United States Engineer Corps is a passport to everywhere. And here, and a general said of them, you gentlemen who graduate at the head of your respective classes are of the opinion that you are the most talented and possibly will make the best soldiers, the most intelligent officers of the Army. You'll find, however, that should war actually take place between the North and Southern states, you get in a tight place on the field of battle. You cannot work yourself out with equations, all of which is very true. A courier has been known to tell his superior officer how to extract his troops in perilous position under fire because he had more military perception, though less education and engineering skills. So, and here's what happens when he gets into his officers. His chosen profession had earnest attention, and every effort was made to acquire information. He knew his studies at West Point were the only foundation upon which to build the life of edifice. Without continued application to the principles of engineering and study, he could not hope to rise above the ordinary level of the military graduate. So his army career began with fixed determination to put aside daily pleasures of life where they conflicted with daily hours of duty. Officers in the branch of the service had pleasant stations, necessarily near or in the city's fortifications for the defense of harbors, forts of the protection of seaports, streams whose currents made bars at wrong places, and other similar work must receive the attention of the engineer. His location was therefore near the centers of civilization. And of course, the temptations incident to city life did not lie so much in their course as in the path of the engineer. The pleasures and fascinations of social life everywhere surrounded him. As soon as he unbuckled sword belt, there was but a step to take to get into the happy world. It is not to be wondered at, therefore, that sometimes the engineer drank wine when it was red, and did not seek his quarters till the sun had glided with his first glance the spires of the neighboring churches.
And what did he do in his first years in his roles in the army, and where was he stationed?
Yeah. Let's see here. He was ordered to Washington and made assistant to the chief engineer. An agreeable change, for it brought him near the home of his wife. A fine horse carried him every morning from Arlington to his Washington office and back every evening. He loved his chosen profession and was rising rapidly in it. Now he could combine equestrianum, equestrianum, equestri, I can't say the word.
Equestrian.
Yeah,
Equestrian.
with engineering, and he was happy. Must have been sometimes merry, for his late lamented military secretary, General Long, narrates an incident of his in writing Captain Malcolm, a brother officer, to get behind him on horseback one evening on his return to Arlington. Malcolm accepted the invitation. The two happily rode along the great public avenue in Washington, passing by the president's house, bowing to the cabinet officers, and behaving in a rather hilarious way generally. It is difficult for a soldier of the Army of Northern Virginia to picture his commanding general on a scene such as been described.
And so while he's serving around the Capitol, he meets his wife. Who is she, and when did they get married?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see here. Lee was naturally exposed to the engineer's temptations, but was careful and abstemious. He went much in the society of ladies, always more congenial to him. His conversation was bright, his wit refined and pleasant. Cement, mortar, lime, curves, tangents, and straight professional lines disappeared then. He enjoyed a dress parade of this kind, and was happy in the drawing room in the evening, and happy in his work on the opera next day. He was in love from boyhood. Fate brought him to the feet of one who by birth, education, position, and family tradition was best suited to be his life companion. Mary Curtis, the daughter of George Washington Parke Curtis of Arlington, and Robert E. Lee were married on the 30th of June, 1831, only 2 years after he had emerged from his alma mater. They had known each other when she was a child at Arlington and he was a young boy in Alexandria, some 8 miles away. It is said that she met him to admire when he came back to Alexandria on furlough from the military academy. It was the first time anyone in the vicinity had ever seen him in his cadet uniform. He was handsomer than ever, straight and erect, symmetrical in form, with a finely shaped head on a pair of broad shoulders. He was then 20 years old and a fine specimen of the West Point cadet on leave of absence. The impression produced were of an enduring nature in an officer. Upon graduation followed up the advantages gained by the attractive cadet.
Okay, so
And
after, oh yeah,
yeah,
so after he was married, he continues his military career, and do we have some letters that by him that we could, from which we could learn something about his character in these years of his life?
yeah. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. While thus professionally engaged, it occurred to him that he would like to possess a seal with the family's coat of arms, and he writes to an Alexandria cousin about it. St. Louis, August 20th, 1938. My dear Cassius and cousin, I believe I once spoke to you on a subject of getting for me a crest, coat of arms, etc., of the Lee family, and which sure enough you never did. My object in making the request is for the purpose of having a seal cut with the impression of said coat, which I think is due from a man of my large family to its posterity, and which I have thought, perhaps foolishly enough, might as well be right as wrong. If therefore you can assist me in this laudable enterprise, I shall be much obliged, and by enveloping it securely, directed to me at this place, and sending it either by mail or some safe hand to the engineer office, Washington City, without any word or further direction, it will come safely to hand. I once saw in the hands of cousin Edmund, for the only time in my life, our family tree, and as I began in my old age to feel a little curiosity relative to my forefathers, their origin, whereabouts, etc. Any information you can give me will increase the obligation. So sit down one of these hot evenings and write it off for me, or at any rate a substance, and tell my cousin Philippa not to let you forget it. I wish you would at the same time undeceive her on a certain point, for as I understand she is laboring under a grievous error. Tell her that it is the farthest from my wish to detract from any of the little Lees, but as to her little boy being equal to Mr. Rooney, it is a thing not even to be supposed, much less believed, although we live in a credulous country, where people stick at nothing from a coon story to a sea serpent. You must remember us particularly to her, to Uncle Edmund, Cousin Sally, Hannah, and all the Lloyds. I believe I can tell you nothing here that would interest you, except that we are well, although my dame has been a little complaining for a day or two. The elections are all over. The vanities have carried the I'm not sure that's vanities. Vanites.
Vanits. Could be a typo, yeah.
Vanites have carried the day in the state. Although the Whigs in the district carried their entire ticket, you'll have the pleasure of hearing the great expunger again thunder from his place in the Senate against banks, bribery, corruption. While on the river, I could not help being on the lookout for the stream of gold that was to ascend the Mississippi. tied up in silk net purses. It would be a pretty sight, but the ride has not yet made up here. Let me know whether you can enlighten me on the point in question, and believe me. Yours very truly, R. E. Lee, Alexandria, Virginia.
A very to the point letter, very self-controlled, very discreet. I infer from what he's saying there that some woman in the family is doubting the paternity of one of her children, and or something of the sort, or one of the members of the family.
Yeah. Um, yeah.
You have any other interesting letters from this time in his life that we could hear from?
Yeah. And to Mrs. Lee, he writes from St. Louis, September 4th, 1840. A few evenings since, feeling lonesome, as the saying is, and out of sorts, I got on a horse and took a ride. On returning through the lower part of the town, I saw a number of little girls all dressed up in their white frocks and pantalettes, their hair plaited and tied up with ribbon, running and chasing each other in all directions. I counted 23 nearly the same size. As I drew up my horse to admire the spectacle, a man appeared at the door with the 24th in his arms. My friend, said I, are all those your children? Yes, he said, and there are 9 more in the house, and this is the youngest. Upon further inquiry, however, I found that they were only temporary his, that they were invited to a party at his house. He said, however, he had been admiring them before I came up, and just wished that he had a million of dollars, and that they were all his in reality. I do not think the eldest exceeded 7 or 8 years old. It was the prettiest sight I have seen in the West, and perhaps in my life. On the completion of this great services here, he would. Oh, okay, that's it.
That's a very unusual. So he was a lover of children, and it was an age in which girls dressed beautifully, even when they were young.
Yeah,
Okay.
and after after a few time after a bit in St. Louis, he was sent to New York. So
Well, what did he do for St. Louis that remains to this very day?
yeah, he supervised the engineering work for St. Louis Harbor and for the Upper Mississippi and the Missouri rivers. So he so that harbor of St. Louis, where you see the arch, it has never flooded. I don't think that is his handiwork.
So very important work for St. Louis, which becomes like the rail hub
Hmm.
for the opening to the West.
Yeah.
And now, after he was stationed in St. Louis, what was the rest of his career before his first military test in war?
Um. Again, he went to New York, stationed at Fort Hamilton to perfect the defenses of the splendid harbor of New York. And he writes to his wife again, and it says, this week I have been closely occupied here. I have kept Jim and Miss Leary constantly moving, cleaning up, in fear I will wear them down. I do not know whether it was your departure or my somber fizz which brought Miss Leary out Sunday in a full suit of mourning, a black alpaca trimmed with a crepe and a thick row of jet buttons on each sleeve, from the shoulder to the wrist, and 3 rows on the skirt, diverging from the waist to the hem. It was, however, surmounted by a dashing cap of happy of of it says gay ribbons, but gay means something totally different back then, folks.
It means happy, yeah.
Yeah. So
Joyful.
I guess he wasn't in a too good of a mood being away from his family, and he was like, so even though they're called his servants, they're more like family friends. might try to cheer him up and like, why are you all in black?
Fine dress in the 19th century was a way of expressing yourself in a very nonverbal way. Now it's people appear as slobs and they think it doesn't communicate anything. So now, what was his first test in war, and how did he rise to the task?
Yeah, so he was now a captain in the U.S. Army and captain of the engineers, and America got into war with Mexico, and
Who did he serve under?
let's see, the history of the Mexican fight. Let's see. Okay.
For the Mexican-American War, we're talking about the War of 1848.
Yeah.
The Mexicans moved troops to the edge of their territory, which they felt was like 5 miles north of the Rio Grande, and the Americans held that the border was the river. And a war broke out. Actually, turned out later, upon examination of the documents, the Mexicans are right, and they knew where the border was, and America declared war without actual foundation. But
Yeah.
most people don't know that we invaded Mexico and conquered Mexico in 1848.
He served under General Zachary Taylor, and so um, and this is what they did. Engineers are necessary to an army as sails are to a ship. They locate lines of battle and select positions for the artillery, make reconnaissance, and upon their reports, the movements of the army are based. They draw topographical maps, construct roads and bridges, and guide troops in battle to positions they had previously
Reconnoitered.
yeah. Scott soon drew to him from his branch of the service Totten, J. L. Smith, R. E. Lee, Beauregard, McLean, Foster, Tower, Stevens, G. W. Smith, and others at once. Placed Captain Lee on his personal staff. This officer, when Scott was assembling the army at Tampico, yep, for the purpose of investing and capturing Veracruz with the General Wood, who had been assigned the duty of invading Mexico from the north, while Taylor advanced from the Matamoros and General Kearny from New Mexico.
And all those names are famous generals and leaders in the Civil War, every single one of them.
And here's what he wrote to Mrs. Lee. And a letter to Mrs. Lee dated Rio Grande, October 11, 1846. We have met with no resistance yet. The Mexicans who were guarding the passage retired on our approach. There has been a great whetting of knives, grinding of swords, and sharpening of bayonets ever since we reached the river. It seems on the eve of active operations. Captain Lee's thoughts were ever returning to his family and home. Then a letter to his two eldest sons, one 13 and one 9 years old, written from the camp near Solet, Salt Elio, December 24th, 1846. He says, I hope good Santa Claus will fill my Rob's stocking tonight, that Mildred's, Agnes, and Anna's may break down with good things. I do not know what he may have for you and Mary his daughter, but if he only leaves for you one half of what I wish, you will want for nothing. I have frequently thought if I had one of you on each side of me riding on ponies, such as I could get you, I would be comparatively happy.
The Mexican-American War, we're going to see someone else participated in that war, in the Mexican-American War. Wasn't it Doc Holliday in that war, or was that his father?
Mm, that was his father.
Okay, so we'll run into this story again when we cover Doc Holliday. And what could we say of Lee in this period of his life?
That he was a he's a very brilliant man. Um, he was already truly a great family man. Loved his family dearly, and whenever he had a free moment away from battle or preparing for the battles in Mexico, his thoughts were of his children or his wife, and always wrote them a letter, and always always wanted to just escape from where he was to be back home with them. Um, as another West Point graduate and famous um, General MacArthur, in his speech to the cadets, a soldier is truly a man who prays for peace. And you could see it in his letters how he's always thinking of his family and wanting to be there with them and not where he was. And all in the scientific and um, weather related work, and I don't know what else you would call it for what he did for St. Louis, protecting a harbor to make sure it never floods, and it's still in working order today. I mean, and that's been, what was it, 200?
150 years, maybe.
Yeah.
I say more than 150 years, almost 200, yeah. So in our next episode on General Lee, we'll cover how he came to make his fateful decision to
Mm-hmm.
fight for the South, his campaigns, and his legacy in America. He's not a figure that the left often demonizes. He was a very regular, upright, living man,
Mm-hmm.
and not unlike the men of his age, but
Yeah.
very disciplined and organized, and
Mm-hmm.
not given to great vices.
Yeah. A great quote by Benjamin Harvey Hill described Lee in this way: he was a foe without hate, a friend without treachery, a soldier without cruelty, a victor without oppression, and a victim without murmuring. He was a public officer without vices, a private citizen without wrong, a neighbor without reproach, a Christian without hypocrisy, a man without guile. He was a Caesar without ambition, Frederick without his tyranny, Napoleon without his selfishness, and a Washington without his reward.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on for this first episode in our life of Robert E. Lee. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yep. And let me see what we have for our next show, folks. And if you like any of our shows, we would like you to support us by making a monthly subscription by going to our website at ordo-militaris.net. And this way we can get better equipment and we can get a better camera so we're not slow and not quick in live action like Brother Alexis is. So please go to ordl-militaris.net. Any of the show pages except one has the Make a Free World monthly subscription button. Click that, follow links, and please be generous. We don't take a salary. We don't get rich. We don't have fancy cars, fancy mansions, or fancy game rooms. Everything goes back into this apostolate for equipment to make it even better. And tomorrow's show, we are going to talk about a Catholic senator, Senator McCarthy, a true Catholic crusader.
That will be a great program, unpacking all the lies against him and showing how not only was he right in everything he did, he saw the problem before it was coming. And if the nation had listened to him, we wouldn't be in the situation we are right now.
Yep. So this is Order Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.